Okay, I'm going to give a brief overview of what I talked about for our Chapter 8, which was sampling. We have a variety of different types of samples. We have a simple random sample, which is where a sample of size n has equally likely chance of being selected. So let's say I have a population of 30. Every sample of size 2 has an equally likely chance of being selected. I'm not grouped off into boys and girls where every group could possibly happen. A simple random sample can be done by using a random table of digits. I could use a random number generator. I could write everybody's names on a piece of paper, put it in a hat, draw them out of the hat to get my sample. Then that's your general basic SRS is what we call it for simple random sample. The next type of sampling technique would be a stratified sample. So on the back of the board here, let's say I have my faculty population from the science, language, arts, and mathematics. I'm going to move it over a little bit so that you can see the acronym. So science, language, arts, and mathematics, and my faculty, and I wanted to, I think that the opinions might differ on parking for science versus language, arts, and math. I broke it up into language and arts as two separate, but just go with it. So let's say that I have 4 categories, and I think that the opinions of these 4 categories might be different. So a simple random sample might not be the avenue that I want to go. I could break them up into strata, which are grouped by similarity, or we could call it homogeneous. And then I could do an SRS within each strata of a certain size until I get the sample that I want. Another type of sampling would be a cluster sample. Again, going back to this example, what I could do is I could break this up into many clusters, which would include each of the science, language, arts, and mathematics groups. Then I could do a simple random sample and select a cluster and sample everybody in the cluster. So cluster is to create little mini, M-I-N-I, heterogeneous groups, and then sample the entire thing in the group. Another type of sampling would be stratified sampling. I already said that. Systematic sampling. Systematic sampling is where you have a random number that you start at, and then you systematically sample every 10th person, every 10th person, or every 5th, whatever that number is that you're systematically going to go through. We also have convenient sampling. And so for me, that would be an example of I would walk into my stats class and I would just sample everybody that was in my stats class, which is just bad. You don't want to do it because you are not getting something that's indicative of the population. Those are the different types of sampling. We have bias that is included with our different types of samples. A bias is when you are you're creating some sort of issue systematically by whatever method you're choosing. So for instance, we could have a non-response bias. It feels like every time that I get on the phone or I'm on a website, something pops up that says, hey, do you want to participate in this survey? And so I don't. I always click no because I just don't have time for that. So that's a type of bias, and we call that non-response bias. Non-response happens a lot of times because people, don't want to do it. So typically the people that respond to surveys are those that are either really, really happy or really, really angry. And so the people that are kind of in the middle, you don't respond. We have response bias. That the story that I like to use is if I go into a classroom and I ask my students about all the drugs that they do, because they laugh about it. I'm not really asking them, but that gets their attention of like, oh, no, I wouldn't tell a teacher about the drugs that I do if I did do drugs or whatever. But you get the idea that there'd be some sort of, the response that they would give back may not be truthful, like dressing up in all Trump garb and going up and asking somebody about how they feel about Trump or Hillary, or, it causes your responses to have some sort of skew. They might lie about it. It's like having a principal ask students how much homework they did the night before. They would want the principal to think favorably of them, and so they might not give the best answer. So that's response bias. We have non-response where people aren't responding. And then we have overcoverage and undercoverage, and then voluntary response. So overcoverage is where you are overrepresenting some part of the population. Undercoverage is where you're underrepresenting something of the population. So let's say I contact people by landline. Not everybody has a landline. So I am overrepresenting people with landmines, I'm underrepresenting those without them. And then voluntary response, those people that volunteer might have opinions that differ from the rest of the population. So those are the different types of sampling and biases that you will encounter for Chapter 8.